This is why I objected to Bill C-16 back in about 2016. It's like
your original sin.
I can say whatever I want fundamentally, but the government doesn't get to compel it. And I don't care if the reason is hypothetically empathy and compassion. It's like, first of all, I doubt that. And second, it doesn't matter.
Well, to Graham's point, there was a couple of weeks ago, the government spokesperson for equalities in the House of Lords, who's Baroness Jackie Smith, was asked explicitly, what is gender identity? What is the government's working definition of gender identity? Given that so many public health policies are being implemented on the basis of this concept, what is your definition? And she's turned it around and said, that's a gotcha. She said, you should take this seriously. In other words, not answering the question, fudging the answer, and turning it around and blaming the person for asking in the first place.
Yeah.
And we have this similarly just today in the House of Commons. We have a member of the House standing up, calling for blasphemy law, calling for the desecration of the Quran to be illegal. We've had cross-party discussions in the UK on the definition of Islamophobia, and it was agreed by both parties that Islamophobia is a type of racism based on Muslimness or perceived Muslimness, whatever that means. But it's not racism because Islam is not a race. It is a very ethnically diverse belief system. So when you have governments, and I know it's very bad in Canada, but when you have governments actually proceeding on this slippery linguistic terrain where even they don't understand the terms that they are deploying, then that means that those activists that I'm talking about have won. They've won out. And they are the most powerful, which is why we've been satirizing them. That's why we've been mocking them, because they're in charge.
We have a YouTube channel where we talk about, the gender issue. And one of the important things we felt was you got to show people it's safe to laugh at this stuff, because because it is ridiculous. One of the things I got into trouble for was Eddie Izzard said that he would have been a victim of the Holocaust. And I said, yes, the Nazis famously bigoted against straight white men with blonde hair. That got me called a Holocaust denier by trans rights activists.
Mm-hmm. And didn't J.K. Rowling or other people supported that point of view, and they got called Holocaust deniers as well?
Rowling is now a Holocaust denier because
Well, what can you expect from a TERF?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
isn't that crazy?
My point, just to come back slightly to my point about gay clubs, I think this is a really important one, because I heard one of you're going to have to tell me the details, but Foucault, is that how you pronounce it?
Foucault, yeah.
Foucault's one of his observations is that in a small village, there might be a guy who calls himself mayor, but he's not the mayor. He's just a crazy guy. But everyone says, "Oh, hello, mayor," and they listen to him and they take his advice and stuff like that. And that seems to be what affirmation is.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But the thing is, once you widen it throughout society, it falls apart. It's untenable once you get outside of that small village. And what I think gay clubs were was a place where outsiders could come. You wanted to dress as a woman, you wanted to dress in ridiculous clothes. The gay club was a safe place to do all that.
Yeah.
But that empathy has been weaponized by straight white men in, AGPs who are basically manipulating the empathy that both women and gay people have for the outsider.
There's a problem there fundamentally that's akin to the problem of the center and the margin.
Yes.
The postmodernists, the French intellectuals, assumed that the reason that any center was established was for no other reason than that of power. And so they construed the center against its opposite, let's say. That's like a dialectic of thesis and antithesis. But there's a problem with that conceptually, because the center is always a unity, and any unity is surrounded by a margin. Right now, and there's an uneasy balance between the center and the margin, because all centers have a margin, and the margin is where all the experimentation takes place that's necessary for the center to propagate itself across time, because it has to change somewhat as it moves. Mm-hmm. But the problem with the margin is that every element of the margin has a margin, and then every element of the fringe of the margin has a margin. And if you go out far enough into the margin, you don't encounter the oppressed, you encounter the truly monstrous. And that's a very big problem.
Yeah.
But maybe part of the problem is that we no longer tolerate the eccentric. I mean, John Stuart Mill writes about the importance of the eccentric within society.
The UK was always great at that too.
Right, exactly.
Great at that.
But if you don't, and if you problematize eccentricity and demand conformity, you in other words, you empower those further marginal states that you're talking about, those realms of the monstrous.
It's not so much. I think that they're. It seems to me more that they're giving eccentrics too much power. Sorry, that's what you said.
Well, I'm saying that those aren't eccentric. I'm saying the ones that they're empowering.
But there's people like, there's one guy, famous guy in the UK, he's got a beard. He appeared on this video that a wonderful Scottish TERF who died very young, 34 years old, Magdalene Burns, absolutely wonderful, was first on the scene of the crime. And her videos are amazing. I really recommend everyone watch them. But she did a famous one about Stonewall, where it was the early days, so they were quite kind of upfront about saying these ridiculous things. And it was a guy with a beard named Alex Drummond, and he was saying things like, "I want to expand the bandwidth of what it means to be a woman," you know. And Magdalene said, very, in one of her many famous lines, "Why don't you expand the bandwidth of what it means to be a man?" You know, and there's people like him in any normal world. Someone like that would just be an eccentric whose friends tolerated him, and it's just Alex being Alex. But now he's like the figurehead for a movement.
Well,
bearded woman. That also might bearded man-woman.
That also might be a consequence, to some degree, an unintended consequence of the technology that unites us, the internet. Because before, if you were an eccentric, by definition, there was one of you. But now online, you can find the other 1,000 sprinkled throughout the world, and you're no longer an eccentric, you're a movement.
Yes.
Right. And so, and we have no idea what it means, what that possibility of, what would you say, aggregation of the truly, not even the eccentric, but the monstrous. We have no idea what that aggregation means. I
suppose what I mean, though, is that if we don't cherish the eccentricity, we don't have the arts.
Well,
we don't have creativity.
Absolutely.
And so we've been demanding conformity from artists, from the most free-thinking types. And I don't think it's a coincidence that at the same time in our history, we've empowered these extremists. You know?
Well, maybe one of the ways that you can tell when empathy for the marginal has exceeded its boundaries is when the marginalized who are being empathized with start to restrict eccentricity.
Yeah,
right? When the now included marginalized become intolerant, the empathetic endeavor has gone too far.
Because they've become the powerful.
Yes, exactly.
It's what Graham
because
said.
They're now making the rules.
Well, Graham said to me once, you said to me once about the jester now sitting in the king's throne.
Right.
And I think that's sort of what's happening. It's a complete inversion, you know. So we don't have. I mean, this is why Graham and I are now in America, because we're going to work in America rather than.
Yeah.
We don't think the creative arts in the UK are really
Russell
fostering.
Brand has departed for places unknown too into the United States for exactly the same reason.
Well, exactly. But I mean, we've.
Hopefully not exactly.
No. We've ended up in this situation, I suppose I should clarify, because Rob Schneider is setting up a new company with myself and another producer I've worked with a lot called Martin Gourlay. And we've brought Graham in as well, because Graham's in a similar situation. We're all over in Arizona. We never expected to be here. We're working on various projects now. And I genuinely don't think it's an exaggeration. It sounds histrionic, but I don't think we could have the kind of artistic freedom in the UK now.
I haven't written in 5 years. I haven't written comedy in 5 years. I had to write my memoir for free, basically, to be paid a bit on the back.
I don't think it's histrionic. Like you
I think people
need
will
a
think it is.
substantive amount of creative freedom and a certain amount of like supportive social infrastructure in order to think creatively, because you really have to be free to think creatively, because it's risky, and you're going to transgress against boundaries explicitly and implicitly, because while you're casting about for humor, you're going to go too far from time to time, like obviously.
Yes.
You know, and you know too that the best comedy is the closest it can possibly be to being offensive without quite managing it.
There's a great phrase in Seinfeld writer has. He says, laughter is a very strong spice. So if you can make someone laugh at something, then they probably will forget to be offended.
Have you noticed, though, Graham, that the shift within the comedians, well, you've noticed more than most, but within comedians themselves, I mean, I remember years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, there was a one club in London that had a document, a contract you had to sign, which sent out a list of the topics you couldn't discuss.
Mm-hmm.
And that was widely ridiculed within the comedic community. No one thought this was a good thing.
Yeah.
And now there's a club in London.
Now it's kind of standard.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's standard insofar as most clubs don't do that.
Yeah.
But the clubs that do, the few clubs that do, are not ridiculed. They're given awards, and they said this is the ideal now. And you also have more than a signed contract anyway. You have comedians kind of policing each other
which
in a
is
more
worse.
surreptitious way.
There's only one kind of comedian that thrives in that kind of environment, and that's a mediocre comedian. You know,
Exactly.
I call them regime comedians.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great phrase.
Well, they're also thrilled about the regime because it's the only... See, one of the things I've noticed about woke books, especially the ones for children, is the illustrations they're absolutely hideous.
Yes.
They're talentless, dull,
interesting.
and like they're monstrous in their incompetence. They're
Yes.
so bad. Well, the only possible reason you got to illustrate that book and have it published is because it has the right political message. Because no one in the right mind would look at a drawing that you made for more than 2 seconds without turning aside. And so you see the same thing is that this is certainly one of the things that I saw in universities, and it was awful, is that ideological purity was the best possible camouflage for appalling mediocrity. It's like, well, I can't do what I'm supposed to do, but I can certainly toe the bloody party line. And if you need an enforcer, well, here I am, partly because I have nothing better to do,
Yes.
or nothing that I would like to do more, which is even worse.